Hello and welcome back everyone, and I am so excited to be back talking about Survivor Season 50 in the Hands of the Fans Episode 2, and we have quite a bit to talk about, with more advantages being found and tensions rising in the various different camps, and I'm ready to dive deep into all of this. So let's not waste any time. Let's start off where last episode left off, because that's how this episode starts off, with everybody waving goodbye as Kyle is evacuated from the game. And there are a lot of big emotions happening. People are feeling dejected, as well as Kyle leaving is putting other things into focus for other players like Q, who had a 5-person alliance with Kyle, Colby, Stephanie, Genevieve, and himself. But now things have to change. With Kyle gone, as well as Colby and himself do not have votes, they need to bring in somebody else, and that somebody else is Rizo, which I'm not surprised about because Rizo was featured pretty heavily in the first episode, with Colby finding him annoying and then coming around to him, although he is outside of what Q deems is the core 4, which is Colby himself, Genevieve, and Stephanie. Now, Rizo is feeling pretty good about himself and his positioning in the tribe, but later on in this episode, we find out that some of the core 4, at least we hear 3 of the 4 of the core 4, they are frustrated with Rizo as well as Angelina, deeming them as lazy. Rizo at one point goes out to hunt with Q and Stephanie, hurts his hand on a stick, goes back to camp, and just sits there talking about eating cheeseburgers with Angelina. We hear in a confessional that Rizo did not come to play Survivor to play camp. He wants to actually play and strategize, do all the game stuff of Survivor, which I can understand, but I would also counter and say that playing quote-unquote camp is also doing aspects of Survivor, that when making fire or gathering firewood or filling up other people's water bottles for them, you can use those moments to have one-on-one conversation to then do what you ultimately want to do, and that is play Survivor. Now, speaking of evacuation, we jump over to Cila, where Christian is making a fire, and in the middle of having a conversation with Joe, Christian looks distressed, and then he starts to waddle off down the beach. Come to find out, Christian had an evacuation of a surprisingly bodily function, and he had to go clean himself up, change his pants. I will say that there are a lot of people that would find this embarrassing and praying that production doesn't use it. But to be honest, I love Christian, and I'm rooting so hard for him because he is just rolling with the punches, going with the flow, and it's fun to see him have fun in these moments, even though it's something that could be looked at as embarrassing and it's happening to him. He just goes along with it, has a lot of fun, and I want Christian here for the entirety of the game, and we'll see more of him as this episode goes on, but we're gonna put a pin in all of that as everybody meets up with Jeff in the middle of the ocean for this week's reward challenge. At first, everybody takes a look at the new Cila tribe where Jenna was eliminated, and then this is where everybody finds out that Kyle was medically disqualified from the game due to his Achilles injury. We see some strong emotions, more specifically from Camilla, who played with Kyle on her season. Ozzy even talks about his own experiences after that exile competition for camp supplies, where he hurt his back and he was worried that he was gonna possibly have to be medically disqualified. I'm glad that he's talking about it and he's feeling better, because I truly was worried for Ozzy coming into this episode. But after Ozzy talks about his own experiences, this is when Jeff turns his attention over to Coach, and basically Coach just skips over whatever Jeff was asking him, ruins the vibes, turns his attention over to Ozzy, and calls him out for having sour grapes in how Coach won the camp supplies between him, Ozzy, and Q on Exile Island. There's a few exchanges of remarks and words, nothing too extravagant, but I love to see this rivalry so heated. Let's get back to the reward challenge, where we hear of the rules, where 3 people, one at a time, will have to go and break a plate to get a key. They'll have to swim, go over a balance beam, swim some more, and take it to a 3rd platform. Once they get all 3 keys, there will be another person from the team that'll have to dive down and release rings, also transfer them through the mini obstacle course to the 3rd platform. Once they free all 3 rings, then one person from the team will then have to get each ring on a different floating pole platform. The team that gets first place will get an extravagant camp kit with 2 hammocks and a large tarp. Second place will get a smaller kit and a smaller tarp, and the third team will be out of luck. I like this reward challenge. I think that it is physical, it is difficult, but not overly exhausting. It's definitely smaller to the immunity challenge that we'll see later on, but even though it is smaller, it is very dynamic and very action-packed that it is fun to watch. And it's quite close if you were first and second. Early on in the season, I am very impressed with Mike. I didn't know what to expect from him coming onto this season, but he just seems to be like a very well-rounded player. And during his round, he is able to get Kalo an early lead. But then here comes Ozzy, looking smooth, looking like he's never skipped a beat from his last time he played in Survivor. He is able to reclaim first place for Cila, and from then on, it was Cila and Kalo like neck and neck to see who was going to be first or second. This was a two-team race because Vatu fell behind very, very quickly. It all starts with Stephanie losing her balance on the balance beam, having to redo it, and what ultimately sunk them was Aubry whiffing on trying to hit the plate to get her key. She had to go all the way back up, and luckily on her second try she was able to get the key, but her team was too far behind. By the time they got all three rings freed, and Q was throwing one of them, Rick Devens had sunk his third ring, winning first place for Cila. Coach got his third ring for Kalo, getting second place, and Vatu got nothing. Now going back to the Vatu camp, we get a little bit more into the insight of where Aubry's head is at, and it just seems like she is all out of sorts. It doesn't sound like she's connecting with other tribe mates. She calls them Rubik's Cubes that she's trying to figure out, as well as she just looks exhausted already. It is day 5 of Survivor, and she kind of looks completely over it. Genevieve notices that Aubry is taking her bag pretty much everywhere she goes. So that puts a thought in Genevieve's mind being like, does Aubry have a Billie Eilish boomerang idol? And at the first moment that Aubry leaves her bag and she goes off to the beach to have some time by herself, the rest of the tribe have their roles and they're ready to just dump out her bag and look for an idol or any advantage that she might be hiding from them. I think this was quite complex and totally unnecessary. I understand that it's like, we're just checking out for advantages or anything. Personally, as somebody who likes to have their own privacy and would find it highly disrespectful for anybody to go through their bag, whether it is on Survivor or just out in the real world, I wasn't a huge fan of this whole situation. But the results is that Genevieve found absolutely nothing in Aubry's bag. But there is one thing that I do like about this moment, and it's that it sets up perfectly what happens later on in this episode, where at Vatu, Aubry does notice something different about her bag. She grabs it, takes it into the woods, looks through it, and come to find out she does have a Billie Eilish boomerang idol given to her by one Christian, who found it at Cila camp, and he was going back and forth on who to send it to. Do I send it to somebody who I may want to work with in the future and hope it works out for them? Or do I send it to somebody who I think will get voted out with it in his pocket so that way I can get it? But he does decide to send it to Aubry, hoping that it works out for her. And it sounds like Christian does genuinely want to work with Aubry into the future. Aubry, who we just heard was having a tough time, is really taken aback by this and is getting a little emotional that somebody is looking out for her or wants to work with her. And so it kind of jumpstarts Aubry. My energy is a little bit more up. I do have somebody kind of looking out for me, and I'm happy for Aubry getting this momentum on her side. Now, as you can see, there is one camp that I have not mentioned at all, and that is Kalo. Let's just take a small look into what's going on over there. Jonathan and Coach go out to fish with each other, and Coach gets a cramp. He gets a calf massage by Chrissy, who people are getting annoyed about because she is acting too motherly and too helicopter mom over everything that's happening with the camp. I'll be for real, if the worst things that are happening at your camp is somebody being too motherly, as well as somebody getting a cramp while swimming, you're doing pretty good in the game. But now it's time to pivot as everybody goes down to meet up with Jeff for this week's immunity challenge. What the teams are going to have to do is 2 players at a time will be having to run into the woods and collect a giant heavy snake plushie. There's a total of 3 snakes that have to be collected, taken through an obstacle course, and brought back to your team station. Once all 3 snakes have been collected, then 3 people from the team will have to work together to do a snake ball puzzle. The first 2 teams to complete this challenge will win immunity, while last place will go to Tribal Council. Kalo gets off to an early lead, kicking things off with Jonathan and Camilla, and Vatu, on the other hand, is falling behind with their lead team of Rizo and Genevieve. But coming from a sports background, I was always told that it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And the very next team to go for Vatu was Colby and Stephanie, who made up a ton of time and even surpassed Cila, who was struggling with Christian and Rick Devens in the second round. Things were getting very close between all 3 teams. They all went back at the same time to get their third and final snake. We had Joe and Savannah from Cila being able to bring their snake back first, leapfrogging both Kalo and Vatu to reclaim first place and get a couple of seconds head start on that snake ball puzzle. But let's be for real, this puzzle is a huge equalizer where you're gonna need hand-eye coordination, good communication, good skills. Kalo does take an early lead, being in first place on this puzzle, but they drop the ball, going from first all the way to last. Cila does not have good communication at all and dropped the ball, leaving the door wide open for Vatu, who was calm, cool, and collected. And knowing that the other 2 teams dropped the ball, they were able to take their time, not make any rash decisions or frantic movement, and for that, they were able to sink their ball and get first place. This all comes down between Kalo and Cila, and Kalo had a pretty decent lead on Cila, so even though they didn't want to make a mistake, they felt like they had to rush, and for that, they paid the price, they dropped the ball, and even though Kalo almost dropped the ball, but they had a miraculous save, not once, but I think twice, but they didn't panic, they didn't lose their cool because they knew Cila already dropped, so they just had to stay focused, stayed calm, and they were able to dunk their ball, getting second place, getting immunity, and Cila was going back to Tribal Council. Now, you may have noticed that throughout this video, I have not really talked about all the drama that had been happening with Cila up to this point, and it's because I just want to consolidate it into one giant clump going into Tribal Council. So let's start off with coming back from the immunity challenge loss. We have Emily and Suri talking with one another, and Emily gives a lot of information of what's going on. She talks about Christian wanting to maybe go with Savannah, Rick would want to go with Joe, and Emily personally would like to vote off Ozzy. Now, this set alarm bells in Suri's mind, being like, Ozzy can't go. So she goes on the offensive and talks to every single person about Savannah's advantage. We should flush it out and we should take her out. Everybody says, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Suri then touches back in with Ozzy, saying that your name was coming up, but I got everybody off your scent. Ozzy is very grateful and decides that he's going to give his extra vote to Suri, which Suri is excited. She's never had an advantage in Survivor, so her getting this advantage means the world to her. Now, putting a pin in that, earlier on in this episode, there was this tension that arose between Rick Devens and Joe, and it all starts off with Savannah, Rick, and Ozzy talking at the water well. And Ozzy brings up haphazardly about this possible 4-person alliance with Ozzy, Rick Devens, Savannah, and Joe. But Joe is not around, so Joe has to be brought into the loop. Now, the tensions arise later on when Rick asks to talk to Joe one-on-one at the water well, and as they get up to leave, Savannah whispers into Rick's ear asking if he's gonna bring up the alliance. Rick's like, no, I'm not gonna bring up the alliance. But just seeing 2 people whispering, Joe's like, I'm paranoid, what's going on here? And Joe just asked Rick right off the bat, what were you and Savannah whispering about? And Rick Devens just tried to play it off like, oh, she wanted to talk about something. And I was like, no, I'm going to go talk with Joe. And he's trying to give a reasoning that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to Joe. So now Joe is even more paranoid. Now jump all the way to them losing immunity, going to Tribal Council, and now Rick's paranoia is off the charts. What are you whispering about? What's going on? So Joe goes to talk to Savannah about what was going on. Savannah tells him about the 4-person alliance possibility, and they both think it's weird that Rick didn't even bring it up. Now, we hear from everybody else that Joe has a list of rules like he's Batman or something, and he wants to play Survivor with honesty and integrity, where everybody else on his tribe wants to lie, cheat, and steal. Like, that is the code of Survivor, and nobody really wants to play, like, truthfully and honestly, you know? You can only go so far. And with somebody who has a paranoia and a clear list of rules of how he wants to play and how he wants to be treated, it makes things difficult. and frustrating. This leads to an argument between Joe and Rick, who try to get on the same page, but nothing is working. They each go talk about each other to different people, which I have to say, I love the conversation between Joe and Christian because I was not expecting Christian to be talking to him underneath the hammock. That just made me laugh really, really hard. But now people are being frustrated with Joe and his set of rules, that now Joe's name is being brought up. Someone who is talking about Joe is Suri, and she brings him up to Emily and Savannah. Now Savannah has red alarms being like, I think she's only pushing Joe so that she can protect Ozzy, which true, but also everybody just dislikes Joe. So 3 people's name is on the chopping block with Savannah, Joe, and Ozzy as everybody's getting ready to head down to Tribal Council with Jeff. Now, real quick, right before going to Tribal Council, we have a conversation between Christian and Rick Devens where Christian brings up that he found an idol. It's the Billie Eilish boomerang idol. I feel like I have to say the whole thing every single time. And Christian says that he had to give it to somebody else on a different tribe. He gave it to Aubry, and Rick Devens is like super excited. They're like fist bumping and having a good time. But this gives Rick an idea. He's like, give me the canvas that the idol was in, and then I want to plant a fake idol at Tribal Council so that if we're in a really bad spot, I can just reach down, grab it, make everybody panic, make everybody pivot, and maybe it can save us at some point later down in the game. Which is a very exciting possibility that, one, if that happens and is able to be pulled off, that is incredible. Another possibility is somebody who is on the chopping block sees it, jumps at it, grabs it, wants to use it, and it's a fake idol. That would be even funnier. The list of hiding an idol at Tribal Council has limitless possibilities of what could happen, and I'm so excited what could happen. But putting a pin in that as everybody goes down to meet up with Jeff at Tribal Council, he's asking questions, people are answering, everybody goes off to vote, they come back, Jeff has the votes, he asks if anybody has an advantage they would like to play. Nobody does anything, so then he gets down to the votes. We see 1 vote for Savannah, 1 vote for Ozzy, and the rest for Savannah. It was 6 votes for Savannah, 1 vote for Ozzy. Savannah is out of there, and as everybody is watching her walk away, Rick is getting the fake idol ready to go. Jeff dismisses everybody. Christian gets up and falls to be the distraction. Once everybody goes to tend to Christian, he plants the idol, and it is a perfect setup. But that is it for this week's episode of Survivor 50. This was a pretty fun episode. I love, again, Christian being the main character of this season so far, being in funny moments, being in strategic moments, finding idols, sending them off to Aubry. Like, he is just doing everything, and it seems like he's in a really good space heading on to further down the game. Now, there is going to be a swap. I'm nervous for majority of the members here on this Cila tribe, as I like majority of the people here. I'm hoping they'll find numbers and support in their new tribes going into next week and be able to stay in the game longer. We'll have to see how all of this changes up and everything. But I thought both challenges of reward and immunity was really well done. Cila just can't catch a break on the immunity challenges. Their communication is definitely all over the place, and I feel like they're the most divided, but they've also gone through the most adversity when I talk about going to Tribal Council twice. Like, they've had to make decisions and determine who was at the top of their hierarchy and who's on the bottom, whereas everybody else, Kyle had to be medically evacuated. So they've never had to be put under the pressure of who are we going to be voting out, the same as Kalo. They've actually been having it on easy street this entire time, so I'm kind of glad the swap is going to force their tribe to have to play and maybe split them up, which I think could be exciting overall in the gameplay, but we're just going to have to wait and see. But this season is starting out really, really well, and I'm very excited to see what's going to happen going into next week and further on. But now I want to turn it over to you. What did you think about this week's episode? Let me know down in the comment section below. What did you think about the reward challenge? What did you think about the immunity challenge? And are you sad that Savannah was eliminated? Who are some of your top players that you think can go deep into the game and or win? Let me know that down in the comment section below as well. Who are some of your favorites on this season and who are you rooting against? Are you excited about a swap happening next week? Let me know anything and everything down in the comment section below. I want to hear what you have to say. But now I want to give a special shout out thank you to everyone who supports me over at patreon.com/angelcakevids. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your generosity. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to everyone who's watching this video up to this point. I'll be back really, really soon with more Survivor content, more challenge content, more content in general. But until then, peace.